So my presentation is going to be extremely different from everyone else's, and I'm going to tell you the warts and all. So today, PetCloud has got 100,000 users nationwide. We're partnered with the 2 largest pet and vet organisations in Asia Pacific, but it wasn't all glamour. So I'm going to tell you the journey and what a lot of you in the room feel as well. When you've been starting out, it can be a bit of a solo journey. So I'm just going to walk you through that. So initially I had the problem, and it was back in 2007 when I was doing a lot of consulting. I had a dog living with me. I had a change in living circumstances. I was new to a neighbourhood. My family lived interstate and weren't really into pets. I found a flyer in the mail and ended up ringing this pet sitting company at the time, and they got back to me after hours, and they referred me to a lady across town who I had no idea about what her backyard looked like, what verifications she had, what other people thought about her, and even whether she had a fenced yard or even whether she lived with a rabid dog. I had no idea. So anyway, back then I drove across town and I had no other options at the time, and dropped my dog off, and I felt like it was fingers crossed, but I had to go and catch a plane at the time at short notice, and came back and my dog was fine. So that experience went well. But the second time I needed to call on her help again, and she was unavailable. So I thought, oh, okay, what do I do? So I called around and a few kennels were booked out. And then I ended up finding this one kennel, and I thought, oh, can't be that bad. And so I turned up with my dog and I said, oh, great, can I have a tour through the place? And they said, well, sorry, we don't do tours. Now, I'm not going to be bagging out all kennel companies. They may not be like this particular one, but this was my experience that, inspired me to create something better. So the kennel didn't allow me to tour through the place for the reason that it upset the other dogs. So I just thought, okay, that's a bit strange. So anyway, fingers crossed again. I had to drop my dog off and went out to catch a plane, and it was a 2-day meeting. And I came back, but before coming back, my plane was delayed, and I said, can you just leave the doors open for another half hour? And they went, no, sorry, you're going to have to pay for another night's minding for your dog. And I was just like, your dog. Like, I bet you they don't even know which one my dog is. I bet you they don't even know its name. And yeah, who knows what's going on there? And they probably just lock the big cage and then head off home. Like, who can't keep their doors open for half an hour? Anyway, so I got back after my flight and ended up picking up my dog the next day, and he was a bit shaken up because he was just used to living inside with me. He was a little dog. And eventually back home I noticed he developed this bronchial cough, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a bit strange. And I took him for a walk out on the esplanade, and a lady said, oh, he's got kennel cough. And I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, don't you know, like, when dogs go to a kennel, they develop kennel cough? And I'm like, what, is that just accepted? And she goes, oh, well, pretty much that's been our experience with our own dogs. So I was like, okay, all right, well, that's not good. So I just thought, this is just so ridiculous. This has all got to be online. So I didn't do anything about the idea straight away. I sat on it for a few years, did a bit more consulting, ended up working for Virgin, and then got a call from Amazon saying, would you come work in Seattle? And I just thought, oh, I don't want to work for another big, just be a cog in the machine of a big, corporate company. So, I really had this burning desire because it really affected me personally. I don't normally tell this, but it got to the stage where I just could not find consistent pet care and options, to the point where I had to give my dog away at the time to a very loving lady. So he was very well looked after, but it just got unmanageable at that time. So that was back in 2007. Fast forward to 2017 or 2018 we are now, and there are a lot more options online, which is great. But what we've done is essentially taken what was a cottage industry. There was no rules out there. There was things on Gumtree. There was all sorts of, different random websites, and we actually worked with the RSPCA to go through processes. So initially, how did I know whether it was worth throwing myself into PetCloud? Well, initially I didn't, but what I did was set up some what you call listening posts, and you can set up Google Alerts to look at different trends, so you can have it send you news items about the sharing economy or about a key industry word or a key technology, and it'll send you once a day an article of summaries that are out there across the web. And then I also had built up my skills from all different consulting. So when you initially start as a founder, you have to be like this unicorn. You have to be the graphic designer, the bookkeeper, the marketer, the everything. And so I fully recommend getting all your skills up before you decide to quit your day job. That was me leading the team at Virgin. But while I was there, I had this constant quote in my head, just going over and over and over, you know, what's the definition of madness, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? And I thought, well, if eventually I don't quit my job, I've got to do something. So I just thought, screw it, let's do it. And so I sold my house, and that gave me a bit of capital to put into PetCloud. And so it was the beginning. I sat there at my desk and I didn't quit straight away. But, you know, that feeling of when you've bought your first domain, it's pretty cool. Things are getting real. And I went to freelancer.com, and I actually hired a freelancer off there. But then he went AWOL after a few days of giving him a project briefing, which I found really bizarre. But keep going. So I eventually set up a team, but before you go ahead and launch into a team, you really need to have your target market really clear in your head. And what I found incredibly awkward at the time is I had no dog, and yet I had to stalk people at dog parks and go, hi, just wondering, what do you do with your dog when you go away on holidays? And a lot of people said, oh, friends and family, but then they get sick of me asking. So I said, what do you do? And they get sick of me asking. And they said, well, sometimes I book it into a kennel. And I said, well, what about, like, is there any other options? And they said, no, I don't know of anything. So I was like, okay, all right. And I just kept asking and asking all different people. And eventually I got the answers of like, well, I wouldn't travel. And it was actually restricting people. So what you need to do if you're going to create some kind of product is go and benchmark, do your research, go and have a look at Google, use a prototyping tool like Axure, or there's Sketchio, or there's all sorts of things, even starting off with just paper, pen, whatever, a screenshot, any apps that are out there. It might be a dental app, for example, but if you like the layout and the functionality that it does and you think it applies to a screen that would be really cool for your site, then screenshot it, grab it, write notes, and then hire and build a team. I used Skype, so every night I'd get home at about 7 p.m. and then Skype the guys in India, and then just I wanted to build a relationship with them and also build up momentum that this just wasn't a side project. This is a project that I'm funding and I'm serious, and this is like I do expect results every day. So we'd have our stand-ups. So what did you do, what are you doing today? What did you do yesterday? And what are your blockers? So those 3 questions. And then PowerPoint also helps when using offshore resources and staff, rather than sending through a whole bunch of words of what's wrong and how it should function. Just screen grab what it's doing currently, what you need it to do. Simple, just images, and that cuts down on a lot of confusion. Important, super important, whether you're using onshore or offshore resources, you need to make sure that they sign an agreement that you own the code. Super important. Don't let it come back and bite you. So sometimes when you go through a change and you go to start up your own business, you know, you go to update your title on LinkedIn, you think, I don't know, everyone's going to roll their eyes as to, you know, me calling myself a CEO. But you know what? Who cares? Who cares? Just do it. Okay, change your mindset and you change your world. It's so true. It's so true. And you know what? You'll start to meet similar people like you, and you'll start to also change your friend circle slightly, because you need to find similar people who are on the same mission as you, and you need to find people who are in the same boat who can relate to you and give you support along that journey. So this was me. So I had I've still got my partner of like 4 years, but he used to do fly in, fly out defence work. And so he was 3 weeks in Papua New Guinea and 3 weeks in Australia. And so while he was away, I used to just work like a bat out of hell. I'd do like 16 to 18 hour days, not sleep properly, not eat properly. And eventually I hit a wall, and I went to the doctor and I explained, because my dad's a GP, and I said to this GP at the time, I just went, look, I know what I'm doing, like I'm not doing all the standard things that I should, but what I'm trying to achieve is this. And they went, okay, well, I got an empathetic ear, but he just said, look, you know, I think you've got to look after yourself, but you know what you're doing, but just, you know, at least if you exercise, you'll get your serotonin up and just keep going. But I high-fived a girlfriend over the middle one because she also experienced a similar thing. So, you know, there was days straight when I hadn't spoken to a soul, and I was just working. And I just thought, wow, I could die and no one would know, because they just think I'm still working. So it's really important. So I joined a co-workspace, and you might find a similar thing. So what's a co-workspace, and what's an accelerator, and what's all these fancy things? Co-workspace is just an open room or a hub where similar people are going to be working on their own startups. So yes, you find a lot of startups referring to themselves like the Airbnb of, or the Uber of, or whatever. You will find, you know, nosy people wanting to go, oh, okay, you're speaking to so-and-so, for how much? And then you'll get your serial entrepreneurs that are sort of held up on a pedestal, but just find out, what have they actually delivered? Find out from other people and what role that person played. But what I did find was incredibly valuable. This woman in the middle, back yourself. And sometimes even your family and friends can be saying that to you, encouraging you, but sometimes it's not until that key person that you respect says it, and then it sets off a light in your head. So you might notice her from Channel 9. She's the consumer expert on the Today Show, Joe UtopiaX, and Dave Holman, he went and rented at our office for a few months, and Don, he works on 3D printing technology and things like that, but just really great people who just really resonated with me and became my friends. So if you can't find good staff, keep going. Now, I contracted for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years, and I thought, I'm going to have the biggest network to call on when, you know, when my time has come to build a product. And I've got 2 brothers in IT, yeah, I'll be right. No, because they've all got their family commitments, their own projects on the side, their own big work commitments, and people weren't available. So I put an ad on Seek. And it wasn't until I renewed after month 1, renewed after month 2, renewed after month 3, and then let the job ad expire. And then I got a little email come through going, hey, we're a duo looking for a startup. Would you consider a CTO? And I was like, hell yeah. So what I did was just trial them out over at a startup hackathon weekend, which is where you just get together and you work together to build like just a fake sort of product or a test product just for fun over a weekend. But what you get is you can see how that person communicates, and you get to know that person straight away rather than just diving in and hiring them. You get to know their personality. And so eventually we got funded by RSPCA Queensland, and how that happened was I am very active on LinkedIn. I connect to a lot of people, so if you haven't got your profile on LinkedIn, no matter, even if you're a student or you're wanting to go into a particular field, if you aspire to go into another field, update your headline to say enthusiastic marketer looking for opportunities, and people will snap you up. So eventually over a coffee, someone told me I need to go see RSPCA. I had a few more coffees with them and a few other board meetings, and eventually we got funded. So I put a team together, we had an office, And then pretty soon we needed to prove ourselves with growth and traction. So surveys and competitions on your, like boosting that as, on Facebook is a really good way of building customers and building your customer base, because investors really want to see bookings, and they want to see how many active users have you got on your database. And form a relationship with journalists. That's really important for traction as well. Don't just throw stuff at them. Ring them up every week and go, hey, I was thinking of this idea. What do you think of this? Or, you know, I see that you wrote a topic on this. It was a really good article. I've got a similar type of topic that I think your audience would really love, because I think they get thrown stuff every single day and spammed by people, and they really, they don't like that. So form a relationship, and also with your surveys and competitions, it'll help you understand your customer base a bit better and focus in on your niche. Then the challenge. So we absolutely grew, but then, and we built this ginormous looking sort of big corporate website, and then we'd get a complaint coming through, and after the boys would go home, I was just sitting there in my hoodie, and I just thought, this is ludicrous. Like, there's a lady just thinking we're this huge team, and she was emailing us going, rah, rah, why haven't you answered my email in 30 seconds? And I'm like, oh, far out. So sometimes there is that uneasy stage before you're able to get on more staff. Yeah, you have to do a lot of things, and you have to get back to those customers. And then staff started getting a bit exhausted. You've got cash flow always on your mind. You know, I still don't know why Maggi doesn't sponsor more startup hubs. But yeah, so this, so the next round, so when we were raising funds on the second time around, it took 12 months. That's a really long time. However, I heard that this is normal for your larger type corporate investors. I didn't know that. So anyway, so I had to feed my team. So I went out contracting. So I went and built like a global collaboration platform for Education Queensland. But yeah, just made sure the lights were on and people's bills were paid and people had a salary in their account. Then when negotiations were signed off, it was all good again for a little while. But there's always things you've got to pay back, and you've got to get back into the momentum again. And then customer support, going back to fueling up that marketing again. So we wanted to have a high quality team, but yeah, we were finding, you know, just with having an onshore team, the expenses were just horrific. We wanted to outsource a call centre in the valley, but it was just huge. And so then we tried an offshore call centre, and I got reports that people were like, who have you hired? Why? You know, why are they all the way, like, why aren't they onshore? Why are they asleep when I'm calling? Like, all these sorts of things, and why couldn't they understand a basic task? And you'll get all different levels, so I'm not saying all offshore staff are bad. I think you have to hire well, and you have to be committed to training them and inducting them into your organisation so they don't feel separate. And yeah, they really have to have a good standard of English, because otherwise it can drive customers away. So what we did, we actually started to leverage the RSPCA's National Call Centre. And what that did was enable us to also come across as, well, what I wanted as well was be more transparent. So right from the beginning, having the RSPCA involved was just incredible, because before they endorsed PetCloud, they said, right, you have to have an online pet sitting course, and you also have to do a workshop with us. So I sat around having a workshop with their senior vet, their senior inspector, their foster carers, their dog trainers, and a few other key people, just so we could walk through the process of, okay, how do you onboard a dog minder? How do you onboard a pet owner? And then what's the process? So they have to have a meet and greet straight up. And so we formalise these processes through strategic partnerships. So even though there was no industry body saying you have to do this, it was to our advantage, because down the track one of our competitors actually got prosecuted by RSPCA New South Wales. So, and that hasn't happened to us because we've always been, you have to have a meet and greet, and you have to do this, you have to do that. So they've just been awesome as a partner. So on Milestones, if you're thinking about doing your own startup, then diversify your skill set before you quit your day job. You have to have lots of different skills. Increase your personal savings or sell a house. Find an experienced mentor. Develop leadership skills. Develop your public speaking skills, and create a deep professional network. Face your obstacles with gusto. So don't just go out there and think of rose-coloured glasses that funding just happens, or that funding happens through, Shark Tank, and that you turn up and you say, "Hi, my name's Deb and I'm here for $300. Or, it's not always like that. One of my investors I took for a beer at the Wickham in Brisbane, and another one I took for a coffee. There was no formal pitches. It was a constant discussion, and it was ongoing coffees, because they're testing, and you should be testing as well. How trustworthy do I think this person is? How well do you think they can deliver? And then in the meantime, you go and speak to their networks. What do they like to work with? And how have they helped you? And there needs to be an ongoing conversation, and that's how the best business relationships come about. Be prepared with professional photos. So there's been times when I've been rung up by GoDaddy, and so PetCloud's on the front of the GoDaddy website, but they wanted to have professional photos to go out to their email database at the drop of a hat. So I did that because they wanted to tell the story about how businesses like PetCloud use hosting and domains to tell their story, to promote themselves. And we've had other camera crews flown up interstate to film us. But look, PlantSnap is another example. Like, don't just think, funding just happens. They're going out and they're proving to, try and attract investors through Facebook. Why not? Sometimes it might take doing a roadshow and then going across on the east coast of Australia and west coast and going and pitching to people. Sometimes it might be having a pub night and inviting your local council or mayor and some journalists. Think out of the box, and don't just think that things just happen, or don't be down on yourself because you think that it should have happened in a different way. There's all sorts of challenges. Just keep going. Be that entrepreneurial mongrel. So just keep going, go around, above. If you face a blocker, find another way to get in there. Just keep going. Leverage any opportunities. So poor old Steve Baxter in the background there got taken out of the limelight when Millie, my dog, came to meet the Prime Minister, and we got on every channel. On TV, and then we took her up into the council chambers to meet the mayor in a tutu. And then that's me chatting with Glenn Richards from Shark Tank. So he sits on the board of Green Cross, who is the holding company of the chain of Green Cross vets and pet barn stores and things like that. So they're an investor in PetCloud. So just do what leveraging you can, and reach out to them. If you want them to promote your business or wear a T-shirt or whatever, just do it. If you don't ask, you don't get. Just do your research. So for us, I looked up and found that 65% of households in Australia have a pet of some kind. So there was an actual need there. And in Australia, annually, pet owners are spending $12.3 billion every year on pet and vet services. And surround yourself with great people. Be flexible and adaptable. Always ask around, as I said, about people's reputations. Get the right expert help, so there can be any one number of failure points. So always, if you can, find a bookkeeper who's not just going to be a bookkeeper. Maybe get their help to help you find grants that are out there so you can have the funding to keep going. Business milestones, so you can head to the small business website and government websites now to find some of the milestones that you need to go through. Product milestones, so you go through this phase of testing before you just launch something. You need to get a lot of feedback, even if it's going to someone at your local restaurant or an airport, or go wherever your customers might be using your product. Then you've got marketing milestones. So like Andrew said, set yourself some objectives and then measure them. Use Google Analytics. And if you don't know how, find someone in a startup hub that knows how, or Google for a local analytics agency who can help you. And sign up your first paying customers. So basically, we are all climbing our own Mount Everest, but what I want to do is just encourage you to just keep going. And particularly ladies in the audience, we've got a low number of ladies that do get funded successfully, apparently only 4%, okay, and that is really low. And what I want to say to you all is there are, it can be intimidating sometimes with these huge legal terms in the boardroom or things like that, but just say, I'll get back to you if you don't understand things. Eventually, it will start to sink in, all of these different terms. You'll start reading, just immerse yourself in environments like co-working spaces where you're constantly learning. And if you're a corporate who's thinking about partnering with an entrepreneur, physically shepherd the entrepreneur throughout your organisation, because you might have employees who have always been paid in the hand and they really don't understand how time critical entrepreneurs' startups are, and just how time can really affect startups and how sensitive they are to cash flow. Make sure your milestones and deliverables are on both sides, and just make your agreements rock solid, because both your reputations are on the line. And appoint an innovation champion. So what do Australian organisations do to become leaders in innovation? So here's what some organisations are out doing. They give access to maybe all of their employees to a portal, or even if you don't have a portal, start with a Google shared spreadsheet. They put their money where their mouth is. So basically, CBA are one example of an organisation where people internally can pitch for a small amount of microfunding towards an innovation idea that they've thought of. They get out of the building, so they go and survey your customers. They crush assumptions. So Airbnb is an example of one organisation where they crushed the assumption that strangers wouldn't go and stay in someone else's home. So go and challenge the way that you're currently doing things. Does it always have to be done like that? Is there a better way? And they nominate innovation champions. So that's basically it today. Thanks for listening and thanks for having us. It's been unreal.